I was saying that was an absolutely brilliant session. It was immensely fun. It was insightful. I think the last thing that he said, the whole thing that just because you're consuming it doesn't mean you're participating in it. It's a beautiful way to even understand culture itself. We're going to have to move on. I'm going to talk about the next panel, and this is a panel that we've been waiting for, not all day, but something that we've been waiting for right with the beginning of with the genesis of the thought even of NowFest. The idea of the NowFest evolved out of this curiosity and desire to see behavioral truths, interventions, and to catch cultural insights that added to the learning and understanding of humans across the world. And we're almost at the end of this 3-day fest that celebrates this diversity, and we've had some numerous rich points of view. Please allow me to call on board the last panel of NowFest 2020. It's a diverse group of practitioners, scientists, and researchers who live and breathe the field. There's Jang, CEO of Busara Center of Behavioral Economics. He's at the helm of Busara Center since 2013. Channing's an ex-trader, social entrepreneur, and teacher. He's responsible for both internal and external strategy and holds a portfolio of projects focused on research. There's Flávia Ávila, and she's the founder of InBehavior Lab and economiacomportamental.org. She's a behavioral economist with over 15 years experience in individual and group behavior in lab and field experiments. Flávia has led and designed 23 field experiments and RCTs while also working with consulting, marketing, finance, strategic planning, and pricing intelligence positions. Bringing an altogether new perspective comes the vivacious Imen Ghedhioui, founder of the Behavioral Science Design Lab in Tunisia. Sorry, my eyes are all blurred. In 2017, Imen founded the lab, and in her quest to apply evidence-based research on transitional justice, the reparation policy, migration policy, and climate change policy. She's a trained psychotraumatologist and research psychologist, and she offers advice on social problems in transitioning Tunisia and looks for new opportunities in innovation and public sector institutions. Groom is back with us after a fantastic presentation on day 2. And it gives me the honor then to introduce our friend again. He was the co-founder of Ghedhioui Change Engine Decisions, and with his immense experience in learning from advertising, he then founded Cowry Consulting in London. He has been practicing behavioral science for more than 10 years and has worked with some of the biggest organizations around the world. It is his vision that has shaped into the Diversify Network. It's a behavioral science network of practitioners and professionals, academics and researchers from across the globe, sharing knowledge and cultural and behavioral insights amongst members of its family. Pedro del Carpio is the CEO at Heuristica at Peru, and he works with applied behavioral science for Latin America. Pedro believes design must be fundamentally rooted in the premise that all products are experienced through cognitive processes such as emotions, perception, learning, and memory. He's worked in a wide range of projects in the creation of traditional marketing strategies through guerrilla digital advertising campaigns across industries. This session will be moderated by the current president of the Diversify Network, behavioral strategist, management mastermind, taskmaster, feudal lord, and most irrational and impractical of all humans I know, who thinks that all that a tiny team needs to pull off a 3-day behavioral and cultural insights fest with 60 odd of the biggest names on this planet, what it really needs is just passion, resolve, and an internet connection. My best friend, partner, colleague, and the singular cause of my premature graying, Prakash Sharma.
Thank you. I hope you guys can all hear me clear. It is it kind of fits. If you guys can hear me clear, just give me a shout out or a thumbs up so that I know. Yeah, it kind of fits that we had a minor mic off moment again as the show comes to end, because That's exactly how we started the whole fest 3 days ago. We spoke for 10 fantastic minutes, you know, and then we realized that the mic was off, but those were some amazing 10 minutes as we talked about how the fest came to be. We were trying to introduce Rory, and Rory kept on talking. And luckily, we just found it out within 2 minutes out here, but let that not stop us from going ahead with the show now. With me is a fantastic group of people. Reshma has already introduced them all to us. And there are many questions that we have. There are fantastic stories we want to share, we want to listen to. But before that, here is what we will do. We'll go one by one and have a 5 to 8 minute short introduction, which each of our fantastic panelists are gonna give about themselves. Let's start with Brazil. Representing Brazil is Flávia. Flávia, 5 to 8 minutes, your time. Who is Flávia? What kind of fantastic work she does, and what is keeping her excited at work or in life these days?
Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I brought one example so you can understand a little bit the work we have been doing here and how the diversity and cultural adaptations are very necessary at this moment. So one option is like today being Saturday. Most people here probably want to relax. And if COVID wasn't here, we probably would go to a bar, have 1-2 beers, relax, have fun with friends. But imagine that there is no COVID and people go to the bar and they want to have some drinks, but they don't. They arrive there, they were planning to have drinks, but they don't have any drinks. What do you think? Why you do this? You go to a bar, you plan a drink, and then we arrive to the bar, you don't drink. So, sorry. So I'm gonna tell you about the experiment we did. In this experiment that we run, we had like 1/4 reduction in people drinking and driving in Brazil. How it happened? Like, how could we change such a huge amount of people that were arriving drivers and they didn't drink? And in fact, this story starts in Italy. I was in Italy in holidays and I received a call. I didn't expect that call. I'm so happy I answered that phone. And in the other side of the line was Ornella. She said, "Oh, Flávia, how are you? And can you talk for a few minutes? I'm Ornella, from Sustainability Manager from Heineken. And we want to do an experiment that we already did in the UK and we want to run in Brazil. But we have some challenge, we have to adapt a lot of things culturally, and we have 10 days to start the project." But I was arriving in a ferry in Amalfi. Well, some of you know South Italy. And I had a choice. If you are a behavioral scientist, what would you do with this call? And of course, I would go to the beach, but before that, I would have to get a team of different background scientists that were Brazilian scientists that were not only in Brazil, but in 5 different cities. So we would have enough time to implement the experiment there. And what was other challenge that we had? One of the challenges we had is that normally you have the Heineken Zero in many of the countries you are, like with no alcohol. But also in Brazil, we didn't have Heineken Zero. But our challenge was to implement the project. When you drive, never drink. So Heineken was organizing. They want scientific data, reliable ones. They didn't want to be only a marketing campaign. And then we got all these researchers together and we adapted. And it was such an interesting part because we had all the support of the Heineken, the UK people, and we had to also adapt some nudges because the idea was to put nudges in the bar so people wouldn't drink. Some made sense in the UK, some not. So we had even to build new nudges for Brazilians so in order to work. And I'm going to show here a little bit so it's make a visual of how we did it. And I know this is the 3rd day, and I know that you heard a lot about nudges. And the idea here is to have nudge for good. Yeah, so I think this image represents a lot what a lot of us here want to do. And as I told you, we had a big problem. How Heineken, a company that sells beer, wants to do a scientific experiment to incentivize people not to drink. So how we would do? And then that's why we need such a multidisciplinary people when we are doing a project like Behavioural Science. And I'm sure all of you agree with that. And I'm going to tell you about some nudges that were the same in the UK and Brazil, some other nudges that were able to get that result of 25% reduction. The first one was the driver's pledge. The driver's pledge, a person would arrive at the bar and the barman would ask them, oh, who is driving here in this table? And this girl, I was there, I saw what she did without seeing me. She didn't see me there. And she just said, oh, I'm driving. Are you going to drink? She said, why? Why are you asking me if I'm driving and drinking? And I said, oh, we are with a project here. If you sign this pledge, you get right away some snacks or fries. In this bar in São Paulo was this snack. We had 18 bars in Brazil, in the southeast and in the south of Brazil. So she signed the pledge and she received the snack right away. The idea here is that we also, we have this pledge that's very nice. It's a very nice idea, working in many places, but it's going to work in Brazil. Because in Brazil, we have over 54% of people that said in 1 week before our experiment that they drink and drive. 54%. So how we are going to give an idea here that shows that the norm also it's different in Brazil and it's important to change this norm. One thing that we did is a mural. That girl that signed there, the pledge, she had a mural of Heineken here saying, we proudly support drivers that don't drink and drive. And then she could just put in the mural and if she wants, she doesn't need, but if she wants. So it was 18 bars and so nice. We had very, very big murals with a lot of pledges. And the idea here was to show that although many people drink and drive in Brazil, there are drivers that are conscious and they don't drink. Also, we did another thing. Remember that we didn't have Heineken Zero, so we could have given up only at that moment. Now we have. It started in the middle of the pandemic, but by then we didn't. And then we built a driver's menu. In the driver's menu, we asked a known barman in São Paulo to design some 3 drinks. In Brazil, with some sentence that really attractive, because one thing that we noticed first is the social pressure that affects a lot how people, you arrive in a bar, you didn't want to drink, but then when someone asks, oh, what do you want to drink? No, that's okay, it won't matter, then you drink. So this driver's pledge, the idea was not the drinks, but if you give the driver's pledge to the driver, the idea is that the other menu is not for you. So it was just heuristics, like availability heuristics. So we had and they built those drinks. Of course, Brazilians are very creative every time, innovative. So in one bar in São Paulo, we had other non-alcoholic drinks, much fun than the other ones. And what happened then? What were all the Brazilian nudges? We have the valet parking. It's very common in Brazil. So give the car, live there, and then go to the bar. In the valet parking, the other nudge was taking a friend home afterwards. It's simple. Don't drink and drive. Don't drive and drink. Because this is also important. Like many discussions, cultural discussions were, which came first? In Brazilian here, in Portuguese, we are saying, when you drive, never drink. And usually in Brazil, you say, when you drink, never drive. So all the details matter here. And then outside the bar, also we had some nudges. And the nudges couldn't say Heineken Zero or anything like that. So they said, oh, if you're a driver, please ask the barman for non-alcoholic drinks. So you're starting the nudge since the beginning of the experience, yeah, the bar experience. Also, we had on the product, because the product was the alcoholic Heineken. But the idea was also to help people that were in the table that were not drivers. So this one says, anyone driving your group? Ask about our non-alcoholic drinks. So we had many adaptations, and also not only content adaptations, but we had many methodological adaptations that we're very happy to see and to have the opportunity to tell here about this experiment that was done, carried on in many countries. And many of the Brazilian nudges were also now tested in other countries. And also some adaptations we did were useful for different non-weird countries. So the idea here is like you have weird countries and the experiments work fine. They're amazing. I think they inspire us. But how to do it with non-weird country? It's possible, but it's so important, the cultural adaptation. So we see here many experiments that don't work, that comes the same. It's nice to test, it's important to test, but they don't work. And they don't work not only because of the nudges, but because how are you going to motivate people, make them have such a high control? You need to, like, experiment, the field experiment, you need a lot of controls. So all the thing you need, that's why we need economists, psychologists, communication specialists, data analysts in a team like that for such experiment. So now we have articles written and can be audited. Like we can prove that you had 25% reduction in this. And another main final takeaway that I think this works for all of us, it's that nudges can save more lives than fines. And we have been seeing this a lot in many challenging contests. Hope we can see even more every day now with such challenges that we are living nowadays. So thank you.
Thank you, Flavia. I would like to next invite, and we'll come back with questions for sure. But for now, let me invite my brother, my hermano, Pedro, and we had a fantastic conversation a few days back around the nature of diversity. Pedro, your point of views, I mean, straight jump into it, brother. What is happening with the behavioral science world? Where is it going?
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my slides, please. There you go. Hi, guys. It's a real pleasure to be here. There's not much I can add to what these 3 days of excellent speakers have taught us about the need of cultural and geographical diversity, right? I think it has been established the need to adapt scientific findings to our specific context. That's probably the punchline of the festival, right? So I want to give my 2 cents, quickly sharing 2 kinds of different diversity that I think many times are overlooked by practitioners of our industry. The first one is diversify the way we understand behavioral economics. Behavioral economics is based on the central premise that there is a right and a wrong way to make decisions. If the choices we make are not aligned with the laws of probability, logic, and optimization of utility, we are being irrational. And virtually all the studies in behavioral economics are dedicated to exploring the ways humans deviate from these standards. And as you guys know very well, we call these deviations cognitive biases. But I want to propose the idea that when we are trying to influence people to help them make better decisions, seeing them as irrational is a bad, very bad starting point. In Heuristica, or Heuristica en español, right? En español, Heuristica is the company I lead. We avoid a priori classifications of what is right or wrong. Instead, we try to understand the specific circumstances and logic people use that make them behave in a given way. This approach is in line with the concept of ecological rationality. What is wrong is not necessarily people's mind. What is lacking is a good fit with the characteristics of the environment. And only from that point of view, we dare to advise strategies for behavioral change. Of course, I'm not saying that we should dismiss behavioral economics findings, not at all. But we should try to review what they mean in the complexity of real-world decision-making. As Mr. Rory Sutherland says, never call a behavior irrational until you really know what the person is trying to do. The second idea I want to share is diversity of our identity. Diversity about our identity, about the awareness of who we are as consultants and the reason our organizations exist. If we work in the applied side of behavioral science, we have to be very aware that our role is not really being scientists. Our role is helping organizations to make better decisions, and that's it. It means, for example, being able to understand first and then explain to our clients that a p-value higher than 0.05 or 5% means something in science, right? But a different thing for their businesses. Think of a p-value of 0.2, which means there is a 20% probability the effect we observe in an experiment is not real. As we know, in science, that result is far beyond unacceptable, aka the finding is false. But in the applied world, that 20% could be good enough and useful. And decision makers could use it to design a service or improve a process if the cost of being wrong 2 out of 10 times is something the project or the organization can tolerate. Let's remember that we're not here to find general laws of human behavior. Our job is helping our clients make better decisions with the resources they have and the challenges and, of course, constraints they face. And, of course, this role goes beyond a different way of understanding the use of scientific results. For me, it also means our teams should be knowledgeable of consulting practices, marketing, and what business management means. To sum up, we should keep our scientific standards high, but we should also be very aware that for decision making, science is an input. Yes, it's of course, the most important one, but it's only one part of a complex equation. And therefore, our duty is understanding that and prepare our companies to help clients and users make the best possible choices in a very, very complex environment. Thank you.
Pedro, thanks so much. And if possible, time permitting, I want to circle back later to your observation about this need to kind of slot things as right or wrong, more or less in the Western perspective. Is that something we're imagining it, or does it really exist? And are there other points of view? Can we be fluid about it, right? But for now, Iman, I would like to invite Iman out here.
Hi.
Hi, Iman.
Thank you. Hi, all. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
So I won't use the presentation, but I won't share my screen, but I'll speak about the Tunisian experience, our small experience in Tunisia. So mainly what we've done with the Behavioral Science Design Lab, which is a research and advisory firm founded in 2017 and inspired by our reflection and our work on transformative policies. So previously, we have done some work on introducing research and evidence to support policymaking process, especially in the democratic transition in Tunisia. And we primarily started working on subjects like the economic reparation, and where we mainly discovered diversity. So diversity in teams, diversity of interventions, and we were the weird behavioral scientists there in the research team. We're working with more people from mainly dominated also legal backgrounds. And I was at that time introducing the approach in Tunisia, and they called me name like Miss Suluki in Arabic, which means behavior. So people in the beginning were like looking, okay, this approach will help us in our work, or how we will do more efficient, we will get more efficient results. And this was a challenging, I learned a lot and explored a lot, and this helped us to how to place the whole approach, and we learned how also to approach different audiences and to work on sort of lobby to set up and build a better understanding of the need of research and more informed policy by behavioral science. And I have to say also, from a perspective like in Tunisia, the political momentum was maybe good for introducing change. There were a need because it was the political transition, and there were a pressure of implementing. We were in a cycle, especially in 2017, in a process of heavy lawmaking, like proceeding on reviewing the whole regulation and the whole regulation and administration and implementation of policy, but without thinking about the policy implementation side. But when you focus on the implementation side, we realized this is where they realized our role, for example, because you cannot only work on laws, putting them in boxes and then sit and looking for how to implement them and get people to opt or to adopt this more compliance, be more compliant. For example, in subjects like, okay, we've done laws on energy transition, on renewable energy, but really on the field, were we able to implement really energy transition policy? And this is where was for us an opportunity to show or to introduce the approach in the policymaking sphere. And that's why lately, and I will mention it after, how we, from this insights and these experiences, we learned how to work closely to the policy making sphere. Mainly, we were supported by parliamentarians, and we designed a product for them later, a GovTech product that also uses some behavioral, some nudges. So I will also introduce and speak about part of the methods we used. For example, we've tried in the beginning to come and present and set up a behavioral and science unit within government. So we've tried at both level, presidential level, prime ministry office, which was counterproductive because at that time, people were not ready. There are some political discontinuity, and tackling new idea was a bit risky for them in the process of as a politician or as a political leaders. So we changed our approach, and we started working by tackling some problems. So mainly, we had the opportunity at that time to start with the fighting corruption, for instance, which is a committee within an independent committee working on fighting corruption, and where they needed some external expertise. When we were able at that time to start and introduce the approaches and test, like reflecting together on testing some behaviorally informed intervention. And we continued with another instance working on prevention of violent extremism, which was interesting because it was mainly working with youth and youth tackling violent behavior, how youth can, and how behavioral insight can help in to create an alternative secure groups, how we can improve social trust. And there we started also realizing the need of contextualization. So the approach was interesting. We promised it like the solution for everything. In français, we say solution pour tout, and which puts more lots of pressure and lots of pressure on us, and a hope for a decision maker that we come with the ideal solution. But then we realized that we cannot apply it as it is. So there is a deep need of understanding and adapting this from a cultural psychology perspective. And for that, we've learned a lot, especially lately in some intervention on water conservation, energy conservation, about certain specific social representation about debt, financial psychology of money in North Africa, and for which our culture is a mix of African and Arab and Mediterranean culture. And this is an interesting also way to reflect on a new way of applying behavioral insight, and maybe a specific way of applying behavioral insight in some contexts. So lately, now we're focusing on a good governance approach with the public service, and we orient mostly our intervention at this moment are more oriented to an audience within the public sector sphere than towards citizens or so we're trying to help them in using a human-centered design approach to improve service delivery, and then thinking about how we can do this and use methods like trial or RCTs. And for that also, we explored and we discovered the need of building more evidences and supporting the whole research and innovation side. So we had the opportunity last year to work to supporting some the Department of Research and Innovation within the Ministry of Higher Education, because we needed to have a better understanding, have more research, and to better understand and better tackle these challenges. And what we think it's interesting about what we've learned in this experience is also not only applying behavioral insight, but learning to have more an entrepreneurial approach in policy implementation, because now we have more the citizen or like the end user who would be using this, imagining the whole environment and then thinking about the possible change we can bring in its environment. And lately, which is a great opportunity, I see it because there is an accelerating side of the COVID impact on especially local government aspect, which is, I think, a window or an opportunity for us where we are approaching some local governance and municipality. And it's an important or maybe a window to see how we can build this or so have do this from different perspectives, not from central or but maybe from a decentralized government. So it won't be too long. That's a small presentation, and looking forward for your questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Iman. We'll come back to, we will be very curious to figure out your initial days as you went around proposing behavioral science solutions, how they would react to it, and probably you have the time for that. I would like to next invite Channing. Channing is here. Channing, all yours.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great.
Yes, please.
Great. First of all, thanks to NowFest, all the organizers. This has been great. I've been following along. I'm in Hawaii right now, so I'm on a funky time zone. But when I'm jet lagged, I put on the YouTube stream and listen to some really interesting conversations. So thank you for that. The prompt of this session is kind of the good, the bad, and the weird. So I want to talk about the latter two, a little bit of the bad and the weird, specifically within this field. And when I talk about the field, I'll use behavioral science more broadly, but what I'm really more familiar with is the smaller subset of applied behavioral economics, more similar to maybe what Pedro works on. So let me share my screen. I have a little bit of a presentation to share. It's a little bit more nuanced maybe than a general presentation, and that's because I think this event so far has been so diverse that it's self-evident that we need more diversity into the field. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, rather than just diversity in the work that we do or the way that we approach the work, diversity in the next generation of behavioral scientists and what we really need. So the overall question is, should we represent all of us? And that'll become clear a little bit later what that means. And so, I'm going to start with this fact that Flávia mentioned very clearly, is that behavioral science is weird as a whole field. The participants started off as really weird. Joe Heinrich really pointed that out in his very seminal paper about how most of the participants that we base our behavioral science evidence are Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. That leads to weird behavioral science. But then the last thing that really needs to be tackled, as we get more and more into this movement of behavioral science spreading across the globe, it's no longer really true that the participants are mostly Western. It's actually that the scientists still are weird, and we know that. And what's really interesting is I'm seeing more and more as we go that things are getting less and less weird. And Busara itself, which is based in Nairobi, is part of that movement to make things less weird. But really, I think there's a different kind of weird that we should be thinking about, a little bit more nuanced, especially as it pertains to issues that are really important, like poverty alleviation, like being able to go deeply within a context. And it's really exciting to talk to people who are deep within their own context now. And this is somewhat ironic coming from an American running an African-based nonprofit. But I think if I don't shine the light on myself, it's never going to happen. So behavioral scientists are still weird. And what do I mean? And why have I highlighted the W and E? I really want to talk about the Western educated part of behavioral science, right? And so weird usually means Western, comma, educated, comma, industrialized, comma, rich, and democratic. But a lot of behavioral scientists are still very, very Western educated. And it's something that we really struggle with internally. We struggle with at Busara. And I think until the field can really acknowledge the fact that the education systems and the pedagogy in which we learn about culture, we learn about behavioral science changes, we're never going to get a really full absorptive experience of understanding culture and context. And it was really great to hear Rodrigo right before this, right, saying like listening or consuming content is not the same as producing it and being in it. And I think that's very true. I mean, in some ways he's saying, unless you've really lived that experience that the hip hop community has been through, it's very hard to really make a mark on it, and unless you're participating and doing it yourself. And I think that's the same. And as long as we continue to ignore the fact that so many people, including myself, are Western educated, we can't really bring behavioral science globally the way that I think that we have a responsibility to. So here's some hard numbers from Busara to really kind of highlight what that means. And so this is from our payroll data. So this is like numbers I can't lie with. I just did a count in Excel. This is for managers and above. So these are all the people that actually run projects, that make decisions on their projects. And these are what I would consider our behavioral scientists. These are managers above at Busara, June 2020. We have 91 total managers at Busara, 28, and let's look at the non-weird ones first. So people that are from non-weird countries. So this is excluding me, this is excluding American colleagues, European colleagues, etc. 28 men, 35 women, 63 out of 91. That's not the best, right? Like that means we still have about 30 people that are from different countries, but maybe that's okay, right? It's a little bit more representative of the globe. I like the free-flowing information. I like that you have lots of different cultures and contexts. We have people from something like 25 countries, and I'm quite happy with that. But now let's look at the non-Western educated. And so then I went back and I actually manually tallied all the people that are 100% educated in the Global South. They never went to LSE, they never went to Oxford, they never went, anywhere else. And that number drops in half. And, we especially work in poverty alleviation, and it's apparent to me that, and I say this again as someone with extreme privilege, that people that get the opportunity to study abroad, and whether it's abroad from your state, from your local community, or even your country, usually it's correlated with other markers of success. That's not totally true. There are great programs in Kenya that allow underprivileged people to study abroad or study outside what normally they would have. But generally people come from better connected, wealthier families. They have better opportunities growing up. The education system kind of grows on itself in that way. And you can see that this fact, really will undercut if you're just then looking at our staff page, or you're just looking at where people are from. You're going to miss a whole lot of understanding this nuance between Western educated and not. And I've seen this distinction. Our staff have demanded us to count this distinction because it is an important one. Because people that have never been to the US, have never been to Europe, they have a different perspective, a different point of view. And I think that's something that, as we start to inculcate and create that next generation of behavioral scientists, we need to find better ways to create this kind of non-weird, this truly non-weird dynamic. So it is much more representative of the world that we're trying to make an influence on. And so I have some other slides. I'm not going to talk about them. Maybe they'll come up later. But for me, I actually have a question back to the audience and back to the panel here is, what other indicators of diversity should matter in our field? What am I missing, right? Like, I looked at this, we're obviously looking, at gender, but there's maybe other indicators that are important, not just because they matter for their own sake, which is actually true and self-evident, but because it matters for the work that we do, right? That we have good diversity and perspective. And we've seen that from examples just in this panel. And then what's worked, if we really want to increase this kind of diversity, it's true that, there are very few real, like the oldest and still the best programs in behavioral science are at Warwick, are at Brown, are at Chicago, right? So how do we, what's worked in the past, and how do we create better systems to really grow and appreciate the next generation behavioral scientists? So I'll stop there and look forward to this discussion.
Thanks so much. There's a lot of learning out there in the way you've been able to structure Busara with this fantastic number. Was it you? Was it the team before you? We are very curious about how did this come to be. Those are really good. Before we go that, let me ask Jez to join us, our final panelist out here. Jez, the good, the bad, the weird, all yours.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for that, Channing. I think that's really, it really echoes some of the thinking that I've been doing. That as this world evolves, we need to make sure that I suppose the channels in which people are being trained, they're being trained in the right way, in the right context. And yeah, it does feel that there's some limitations. And yeah, I suppose so Reshma said sort of at the beginning, so I've been very, very fortunate to work in behavioural science for quite a long time, but also around the world. So I've done projects in Cape Town and Johannesburg in the townships. Done work in Santiago in pig abattoirs. I've done work in Mexico City around obesity, Manila around malnutrition. And then a lot of work in Europe, mainland Europe, Germany, Spain, Italy, France, UK. Not so much, I think, in Eastern Europe, which is quite interesting. I think that's an interesting sort of area where I think there needs to be some more energy and more growth. And then I've also done some work in Australia. So kind of the last 10 years had like a lot of different contexts that I've worked in to try and experiment with the theories, the frameworks, the models, and I've kind of, you know, hopefully this isn't going to upset too many people, but I think behavioural scientists have got to realise that they are responsible for holding the growth of behavioural science back, and I'll explain what I mean. That there's this fascination with science, and I fundamentally believe that applied behavioural science should start and end with science. But there's a massive diversity skills gap. And until this conference has raised the agenda around it, which is bringing in design and design thinking, and it's huge, right? So in my career, I know that, and I've seen work from some of the preeminent nudge units around the world where they've done studies and they've said that this stimulus that they've shown people is confusing, right? And yeah, they've got a result which is, it is confusing. The reason it's confusing is the way that it's been designed. It's the way that it's been put forward as stimulus in the research. It could have been done in a way which was far, far, far less confusing, but because the behavioural scientists can't design, they can't use psychological principles and a broader suite, a broader palette. Essentially, they're making these, I think, wrong and incorrect sort of assumptions and findings about actually what's going on. And I've been experimenting along the way to try and figure this problem out, like behavioural design. And I want to be really clear as to go, I don't mean designing for behaviour change. You know, we're all very, very good at identifying and diagnosing the problem, identifying the strategies for what behaviours we need to change, and ultimately how we're going to measure those outcomes. What I'm talking about is the stuff that Flávia was showing was, you know, when you've got those critical interventions at that point of context, what does it look and feel like? So when you have those cards that Flávia showed with Heineken, you know, is it just green or is it has other colours? What font is it in? Is it in the brand font? Is it not? How big is it? How's the card feel? You know, when you put your name up onto that board, how does it look and feel? And all of those things, I think, is just a massive gap within behavioural science. So I've been trying to figure out what's the best solution. And when I first started out, the solution was let's brief creative people to design that. And what you find is creative people don't like to be told what to do. Essentially, they want to be given a brief and then a creative license to do something that they want to do. So what you find is you brief in essentially the behavioural strategy, and what you come back with is executions that lack behavioural science. So what you have to do then is backfill and put the behavioural science back in. I then started to go, okay, that isn't working. So pass the parcel isn't working for behavioural design. What about if I get essentially designers that are really interested in behavioural science? And they might not be necessarily skilled and trained and have academic qualifications, but they're interested in it. And what I found is that they just don't have the empirical mindset and the precision around the behavioural science. So what I've found is that the best behavioural designers are psychologists or economists that maybe have gone on to do other things, that have got a real interest in essentially execution. And in my career, execution is everything. You can have the best behavioural strategy, the best experimental design, but it's fundamentally flawed when essentially the execution is poor. So I think, you know, I echo, Channing, your call really, which essentially is kind of, let's have a rethink, I think, about the skills that people are being trained in to essentially apply within the public sector and the private sector. And I think there's a big gap. I think there's a big gap in terms, yeah, for sure, in terms of representative of MSCs from other universities around the world. And I think that would be brilliant if we could start to kick those off. And I think the second thing is that I think the MSCs, they need to essentially have design thinking and behavioral design thinking within their curriculum. So for me, that's critical. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a lot of very, very poorly designed but very, very clever experiments. And I think that's kind of like the first point. The second point is I don't think behavioral scientists are thinking big enough. I think because we've got quite small businesses. And we're at the early stage in terms of market maturity. Often, I think we find that we look at things within our own domain, within our own context. And when I say think big enough, I just want to qualify that. I'm really, really nervous about the use of the term a unicorn nudge. So there was a conference, I think, about 18 months ago, where it was comparing nudges to maybe tech giants, and I think that's pretty dangerous. And I personally don't want to be a part of big nudge theory that essentially positions itself as a unicorn sort of tech brand. When I say thinking big, I think there are some organizations and some businesses around the world that are truly global, that truly understand how to, I suppose, organize themselves, deliver, execute, and they've been doing it for tens, if not hundreds of years. And those are the sort of questions that I'm now getting asked, which is big organizations. It might be like a HSBC, or it might be an Amazon. And they say, so how does this work around the world? And at the moment, the answer is, well, we're at the early stages. And they say, how do you work across the world? And I say, well, it's quite an early market maturity. So there's a few people around the world. And that really drove me, I think, to essentially reach out to Prakash and say, I think that we need to think bigger and essentially deliver these global solutions to these global organizations. And so we got talking prior to NowFest, and to say, actually, can we start to bring together like-minded organizations and businesses that really, really do care about society and communities and businesses within those societies and communities, and start to develop a collective network. So we've been contacting different people in different regions, and we're slowly beginning to grow it. It's early days, but I think what we're trying to do is essentially solve those problems that are bigger, that have local interpretation and need to be solved. And I'm really, really hoping that we can start to essentially engage some big challenges and with some big organizations. And it's already started. Once you've connected people together and you've got something to talk about, then essentially you can talk about it. And I'm really, really excited about essentially the next decade of behavioral science. I really, really am. I think it's going to be amazing. I think we've been caught up or run past by technology. Initially it was social media, then it was AI. I think that bubble will burst pretty quick. And I think behavioral science has just been doing some hard work in the background. So, I really sense that there's a shift in momentum. So yes, my sort of 2 points on diversity is that I think we need to acknowledge that we've got a real gap in our skill set, which is behavioral design. And I think that needs to start to be infused into some of the curriculums as Channing was saying, in maybe some of the established programs. But then quickly, we need to make sure that we don't make the same mistake again in all of the other MSc programs, which hopefully are going to start to pop up across the world, which I think would be really important. And then, once we've got that, I think we'll have teams that essentially we can execute. So senior people with large problems and resources to solve those problems can essentially say, okay, so I need to operate in 6 markets. How do I do that in behavioral science? And currently, there's no real solution that I can see. Whereas I think we're starting to maybe put that, and no doubt there'll be other people and groups coming together, and hopefully that will start to generate, I think, more interest in the sector. So yeah, I'm super excited about the next 10 years, and super excited about NowFest. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think it's been a real line in the sand in behavioral science to say, it's been great so far, guys, but actually there's another half of the story, and we're going to really drive that. So it's just super exciting. So thank you very much, Prakash, for leading that charge.
Thank you, Jez. Let me open up the panel discussion with a couple of quick questions here and there, and then at some point of time, we'll take up the audience questions. I'm also very aware of the time zone for Channing out there. Also for people out here, people who are of the Eastern time zones. One of the good things about growing up, crossing your 30s, is to realize that, you know what, nobody's in charge of the world. So essentially it is us, right? And all of us are 30 plus here. Given those realities and the fact that we are discussing the good, bad, and the weird of the behavioral science, right? Now, what is it that we can do? Because either there's no one else coming to fix it. There's no government body out there saying, let's go and fix this. There's no university saying, let's fix it. What is it that we can do? Pedro, you want to take that up?
Yes, sure. I think that the internet is a blessing. We don't really need to study. I mean, and I'm going to be very careful because I did, but we don't need to study in Europe, for example. We don't need to study in the UK. You just Google it, find the paper, understand what they say, and there you go. Of course, that's not the whole story, but it's part of it. That's the beginning. The internet is our tool to accomplish whatever we want.
Fantastic solution out there.
I would completely agree with that, Pedro. I think there's another thing that I've realized is that the pandemic has made the world a lot flatter. Like it used to be that you're not in the conversation in DC. You're not, I'm in Nairobi and people are talking to each other in New York and they can pick up the phone. But now everyone can pick up a Zoom call the exact same way. And I think that's created this kind of, the remoteness has actually been a great equalizer for people that are based in the global South. And I think that we should continue to leverage that. We should, like this is radical, but as conferences stay online, we should say, no, we're going to stay online. We can't afford to send 50 people to DC every single year, right? Like that's going to cost more than our whole budget for the organization. Let's all band together and say, let's do everything digitally. Let's make sure that everyone has the same equal access to opportunities for knowledge, for sharing, for collaboration. I think that's really, really important. And I would completely agree with leveraging our remoteness, leveraging the internet to make things a lot more level.
Flávia, you want to join in?
Sure. And I want to bring also another challenge we have here in Latin America and everything. We have researchers and people in this area that is very, have a very good background, have a lot of experience, but they usually go outside. So in our team in Behavior Lab, talking about diversity, we wouldn't have InBehavior Lab if there were no internet, because like our partner is London, the other in UK, the other in US, the other in Uruguay. And so this was the only way, the internet, to make all the researches we are conducting here, because we have been very rigid. So it has to have someone academic that is finishing the PhD, or it's outside, because they usually are. And so the diversity also that the internet brings is that, like, we are in touch all the time. So we know a little bit which things are being discussed in some nudge units, in some departments, because also Jazz was saying about behavioral design, that really helps. We work a lot, like it worked in this client and others, but we also have many economists in our team that are very academic. And it's not behavioral science, experimental economics is another thing completely different. And then we have all these desires of research, because usually the people from this area are very passionate. So we of course, I'm very happy with the next 10 years coming and having the pandemic now and giving the opportunity for us to be connected. And how many people I met in such a short time. I did the master, in UK. And here in Brazil, in 2000, that's I think is something important to say. In 2016, we created an MBA in behavioral economics that was EAD. And this would be impossible in São Paulo completely, but 80% of our professors, lecturers were outside of Brazil. They were Brazilians. There are many in Amsterdam. So it made, like, we have over 300 students that graduated in an MBA of 2 years here in Brazil in behavioral economics. And it was kind of, how do you say, lucky in a way, like a better thing, or EAD, or doing classes by internet in 2016, very few did. But then I said, oh, there is the good part. So we can have people from everywhere, and we have very nice ones everywhere around the globe. So I'm very glad. You know, I think we were very lucky also in all this science to be able to get connected and get, as Pedro said, the papers, the articles, or so many studies that they have done in the last decades. So we have this to inspire us. We can ask people who did things and what went right or wrong, and we can do here. So I think let's use the good part also. And I'm sure pandemic and the internet was very helpful for us to achieve have these possibilities here.
Flávia, is there a Brazilian flavor to this course that you have put down together? You know, like, is there a certain difference from the way it is normally taught outside? Are there, I'm talking more.
Yes, and really, I can say that we have some students also here that are LSE professors, like really like our, we have professors that had done masters, other courses in LSE. And what we did, it was very hard. We had a project in 2015 that we had to get people from academia, private sector, public sector, to do like a guide. We did. We also had like Richard Taylor in it. It's a book, Richard Taylor. And so just to say, oh, we have all this content in Portuguese and it's robust. So, but when we started organizing this, we saw that there were many the views, very different views about behavior economics. So the lucky part, I think, started here. We have Chris Stummer, we have many others also that are more academic, others that are in nudge units. And what happened when we created the MBA? And we did something like that. So 30% of the MBA is working on methodology, research, analysis, experimental methodology, and many others. The other part, you have like consumer psychology, other nudge, sustainability, conscious consumption, many. We have data science that also Bernardo Nunes, some of you know, it's in Amsterdam and gives these classes. And also the third part, we have finance and financial education. So it's hard because we have a little bit of each, but it's kind of a history to have over 300 students that studied 2 years in Brazil with professors that are very admired also. So what we did, we have many public sector, we have a mix. And I think we were very lucky in this way because it was the first program that was going to do that in 2016. We had LSE, but not many others. So I think it was a big mix. It's challenging because you have students that are from very different backgrounds, and we know that behavior economics is very mathematical. So you have math. You have like classes that are models of individual choice, models of social preferences. So I don't know how it worked. I'm just kidding. I don't know how everyone could do so many different things. We have design thinking too, of course, behavior economics and design thinking. But I think it worked, and we have here, for example, students from World Bank, and many students are in good places. They did the MBA. So, but was a lot of diplomatic things. So a little bit of this, without losing the robustness, the serious part, and so that's our experience.
I think we can understand where your confidence for the next 10 years is coming from with this story of yours. That's really fantastic. Even quick, what's your point of view? We're talking with respect to number one, opportunities for students. And we heard that point of view saying, you know what, we have the great unifier right now is the internet. So what's your take on that, around Tunisia, around Middle East and North Africa region? Number two, this debate, is this debate something that people actually in the Western world are the ones who have the luxury of debating about it? What's happening at your end? Do you even have the luxury of debating, or are you saying we straight up need to solve problems? What are your realities out there?
Okay. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. So regarding the question about the internet, so I do believe the pandemic have helped accelerating some the way how we reach and we have access to education. But the other side of it is when as countries so varied, or if in a rich country it's easy to have the infrastructure to cover internet and have the e-learning and online material, but in some specific context, even in a homogeneous country like Tunisia, you can still have areas where people get more deprived with the online content, with having access to an online content. So for the other question about, could you formulate, because it's about, you said about the dialogue.
Yeah, it was about this whole luxury almost of having a debate saying, you know what, is behavior?
Okay, okay.
That's a luxurious business. You need to have the time to debate about that. So
yes.
are you in the position to debate this? Do you have the luxury, or is it just, you know what, there's a situation out here, we've got to fix things. What are your struggles?
So we still, I think, well, I don't know the luxury or not, but we still have the emergency of intervention and building and in the context of country post-transformation. But still, I think I see it also as part of a democratic institution where we have behavioral science, and debating about the way how we do things is an opportunity of participating and consulting and involving more in the behavioral design, for example, or using a human-centered design, consulting other experts. It's a way to bring citizen consultation and representation or expectation into a policy. And there is also an interesting thing about, for example, some challenges in some nudges in a post-2011 context in Tunisia that, for example, some nudges who are made to push people for more compliances are not really accepted here, because in a let's say, revolutionary context, like people are more proud of not paying the bills or not, so this is sort of weird cultural.
No worries.
But I think this was one of the main struggle about having people. The word compliance was not to mention. So probably.
No worries. Thank you so much. That's a fantastic point of view. Just quickly, and just a quick word to the panelists. I think I'll invite you all to ask each other a question too, because I mean we got the chance of knowing people from different parts of the world out there. So if there's something you want to ask each other, just have that ready. We'll take it up straight up after asking Jez. There's one question, Jez. Where do you see the next 10 years at? I mean, you have been right there at the beginning of behavioral economists coming down to the applied world with your work right there in the beginning with Ghedhioui, then you work with Cowry, right? And now with Diversify. What is it that you see? What is your vision?
Yeah, I think it's capability building within organizations. That seems to me the big win. So, and it's interesting because I'm actually talking about, a challenge to the business model of a consultancy. So, what I'm seeing is the rise of people wanting to practically apply this within the area they operate in. If they're, working in a local council or they're working in a business, and it's ensuring that capability has got professional legitimacy, and I think it's really important. So so I think I think Dan Ariely said it a while ago. Myself and Rory used to talk about it, that every business will have a chief behavioral officer, you know, or that skill set. Because, you know, a lot of the business and organizational problems, societal problems, are often behavioral, not always, but a lot of the time. So you know, my hope is that every company, every council, every government will have a really robust, diverse of skill set team that can solve these problems. And, you know, the interesting thing I think is, you know, a lot of our work in behavioral science right now is actually solving problems that currently exist. So like legacy, it's like we call them fixing problems. So this isn't working. How can we fix it to make it better? And I'm really hoping that, I think Cass talked about a sludge audit, you know, and we do friction audits. So once all that's done, I mean, obviously it's not going to get done, but once a lot of it has been done, I think what we often find is it gives you legitimacy to then work on new things. So designing things with a blank sheet of paper, and that is really exciting. And I don't think you can do that having, you know, a 5-man or a 60 sort of woman team, you know, a 90-person team that Channing was talking about in Busara. You need to have like thousands of people. You know, like we work with Tesco in the UK. They've got 450,000 employees, right? So if you're going to orchestrate behavior change in that organization, you're going to need a considerable amount of people. So that's what I'm excited by, the fact that when you start a job, in the same way that you have to learn some of the skills about how you behave, hopefully behavioral science will be part of that. Yeah, it throws a challenge, because you kind of go, so what are we going to do? And I often say to my team, I say, that's not my problem. I'm not 30, I'm 50. So, you know, that'll be your problem in 5 or 10 years time, guys. You know, I've cracked this bit maybe, and it's over to you. But that's kind of my kind of vision, which is, you know, making behavioral science very practical, very accessible, very usable, solving the problems that currently exist, and actually, you know, designing things without all this sludge or friction in it for the future would be amazing.
Thank you, Jez. Channing, one question, and with that, we can also start the cross-questioning of the panelists to each other. You are already at a place with Busara where many of us would like to be in terms of a diverse set of panels, right? Now that you're already there, where is it that you want to go with Busara? What is your vision? How do you see it? And then you can ask a question to any of these panelists out there. You can just pick one and say, you know what, dude, this is my question to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure, you know, I think the grass is always greener, right? Maybe you look and you say, oh, I'd like to be a larger organization. I'd actually like to be a little bit smaller and maybe a little bit more nimble. You end up being the bureaucracy that you're trying to fight against a lot of times. I think there's two things that we're really trying to think hard about, and it has a lot to do beyond the topic that's top of my mind that I just shared, which of course I'd love perspective on. I think what Pedro and Jazz talked about is another big thing, is diversity of skills, both in consulting skills, like solving real problems. I tell people all the time, no one gives a crap about a p-value, right? Like, people want to make decisions. When I was a trader, when I was trading equities, if someone told me there's like a 51% chance that this is the right move, I'd say I'd take that every time, right? Like, and so why are we asking ourselves to recommend only at a 95% or 99% confidence? So that kind of skill set, I think, is a really important one to solve problems most of all. And then to Jez's point, one of the things that we've also realized early on is that design matters so much. And coming from a behavioral econ background, the whole point of behavioral econ is to identify some kind of heuristic and leave everything else the same and make it as clear as possible that, like, this is the different piece, and just leave it at that. And because of that, design is crude and ugly, and it's a really blunt instrument. And I tell people at Busara, don't test mediocre things. You should only be testing things that that you are sure is the best thing that you could do. You're already sure that this is going to work, right? You're not testing to kind of iterate things. We're not Facebook or Google where we can test 100 shades of blue. We usually get 1 or 2 tests. It should be the best damn thing that you've ever come up with. So you need to test your best. And we've been really trying to think, what technical capabilities at Busara do we need? So far, right now we have 3 different teams. We have experimental design, we have qualitative research and human-centered design, and we have data and data analytics. But we have also recently built a comms team, which thinks about communications in a very different way than the designers do, right? And so as we you know, right now I'm basically just collecting these different teams and these different skill sets, but the future for me is really understanding what is the right individual expertise is, and then what is the right perspective taking and cross building within Busara, so that, you know, is it possible to have a fully fledged behavioral scientist, as I think, that is perfect at everything? Or like Marvel superheroes, is it better for some people to have very good skills in some, and then you mix them together, right? That's what's on my mind. Yeah, a question that I would have for people, you know, that I've also been thinking about, especially, you know, getting the luxury to talk to such a global and diverse set of organizations, is how do we work better together? How can we do things, right? Like every time I hear what other people are doing, I'm like, that is so cool. Why? How can we accelerate the work that we're doing with each other? I think a lot of times with a fledgling industry like behavioral science, there is this tendency to compete against each other, and that's always going to happen, right? Like we're competing for the same RFPs for the same clients, and we're trying to solve the same problems. But at the end of the day, like the better answer is to make the industry bigger and better, right? The better answer is to say, no, we're competing against bad design. We're competing against these other kind of industries that we're trying to replace. And my question to you is like, how can Busara work closer to all of your organizations? How can we work together? How can we form, as Neela said earlier, great South-South collaborations? How can we create secondments where maybe your staff spend time at Busara for a year and we send our staff over? How can we work on these kind of things so that eventually we have a really strong network, as Jez said, where we can solve global problems all together? So that would be my question to everyone. Are there any concrete things that from whatever position of authority or power that Busara might have or resources that we might have, how can we help?
What a fantastic offer, man. Make them an offer they can't refuse, and we have your number, right? Flávia, would you want to join in with a question to any of the panelists that you have in your mind?
A question, or we're answering the question? Another question?
A question that you have for any of the panelists out there, for Pedro, for Channing, for Iman, or Jez, not me, yeah? So, but for any one of them, do you have a question that you want to ask them? Something you're curious about?
Again, for all of them, I think just talked a little bit about behavioral design. One thing that we are I'm also an economist, so we are statistics, p-value, and everything. And the discussion that's having here, I live in Brasilia, yes, the capital. It's how can you use behavior insights without such big field experiments like RCT? I think that's a challenge we have, and I know many of you have. We do the experiment, we are very critical in everything, in doing it, but many things can be behavior informed and not being an RCT in field experiments. So I know Brazil is still in the level that's very, very important, RCTs and field experiment, to say, look, it really happened. Like, it's not something, some data that's confusing, it happened. So we are in this stage, and I'm gonna talk about training. Like Busara is really a benchmarking. I think you have a huge team, and I'm sure we can work together, because the thing is, like, here you need to be robust, you need to be serious, but also how can we do more? So that's the thing. Like, it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of staff to do many experiments. And I think there are so many opportunities here. We had one experiment in Bolsa Familia that was amazing, but we have health, we have education, and yeah, we have very few behavior economists and scientists still in Brazil. Yeah, I don't know how you deal with that.
Thank you, Flávia. It's always nice when, instead of asking questions, your panelists offer you answers straight up. Pedro, is there a question that you want to address to any one of your co-panelists out here?
Yes. One advice, probably you have been asked this before many times, and I think is probably something that our viewers want to know. What advice to people who want to start their journey in this field, what advice would you give them?
Who wants to take up this particular question? Iman, Jez, Flávia, Channing?
There are so many new, master students who are interested in this field, but there's not that much big, demand of these skills. there are not many companies recruiting behavioral scientists. So what should they do?
Is it so, Pedro? You're saying that somebody that has an MSc that is looking at the next 30 years, that's
Undergrad, graduate, yes.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and so we talked about the MSc programs that are kind of in kind of more Western, you know, and I get 3. I kid you not, I get 3 emails a week. So I get 150 people asking me for a job. So essentially the supply that it is definitely outweighing demand, and this is what I do, and I'm not saying it's the answer. I can't hire 150 people every year. I wish I could. I really wish I could, and I try hard to convince senior people in organizations to spend money on this. And I always say I've got a really entrepreneurial streak, and that entrepreneurial streak is to create jobs for people that love doing what I'm doing. That's what drives me. And you know, this year we've hired 4 people despite COVID. I think three from India who are working with us virtually, 1 from America. And so my plea would be that when somebody asks you for help and advice, then you give them time. So what we do is we have something called under the hood. So I can't offer jobs to all of these people, but I can tell them what it's like to work in a consultancy and the type of work we do, and they can meet my team so they can see that there is a career path for them. So they can say, okay, people have got jobs. They seem really nice. I'm a bit like them. I might not be able to get a job at Cowry right now, but actually this has given me some thought. And I often say, look, we do some public sector work, but predominantly it's private sector. And we do some public sector work, which is run by private sector sort of companies. And I sort of say, like, this is the panacea of opportunity. You know, come and speak to us and see if you like our culture. If it's not right for you, that's fine. There's other things that you can do. So I would just say, what we can do is give people time, and I know time is very, very precious, but try and find interventions that essentially give people the enthusiasm to go and look elsewhere, and then, you know, work hard to create jobs. You know, that's the game, certainly the game that I'm playing, and it's very fulfilling. You know, I always say, you know, I'm never not surprised about how good young people are. Like every time, like I've had 2 instances this week. Danaraj has just come out of the Warwick program, I think. And he's done some work which is transformational to our business, and he's young. He's just like it was amazing, and I'm like, God, you know, I just want to, and that's what I mean. The challenge point is like I just want these budgets to be bigger, you know, from government and from businesses, because there's just, you know, so many good people out there. So yeah, that's kind of my plea, I guess.
Well, thank you, Jez. We should be wrapping up soon. And before we wrap up, we will take 2 minutes for a minute or 2 for each of the panelists for final thoughts on a topic that is dear to them. It could be behavioral economics, or you could just go and advocate something else. That's fine. It has been a fantastic discussion out here from this whole idea of getting tied and bogged down by definitions, as Pedro spoke about in the beginning, saying this need to say, this is the right box and there is a wrong box, and this is how things must be. And there is that way of looking at the world. And there's another way of looking at the world and saying, maybe there's no right box or a wrong box. There are just different boxes, and let's just find out what are those boxes. And I speak in very general terms out here to make things easy. So there is that. There is the beauty of the cultural context that Flávia spoke about, with her example out there. There is fantastic work Busara is doing, and man, oh man, they're already at a place where it'll take us some year to reach. It's quite fantastic. Imen and her journey right now in Tunisia, and Jez, your work with Diversify and the Global Summer School. So I think it's pretty much sorted with the work that Flávia is doing with 300 MBAs coming out, and I hope there are more behavioral economics and less MBA, because the world has enough MBAs, is what a good number of professors who actually teach MBA students told us earlier in the day. Closing remarks, Pedro.
Think about your client. and acquire the skills that you need to fulfill their needs. That's my
Fantastic. I like your pauses.
yeah.
I like your pauses. As someone who talks rapid fire, I think I want to inculcate that habit of taking the right pause. So I think, yeah, I'm going to pick the right fast from
To
you.
make it dramatic.
All right. Flávia.
We talked a little bit about difficulties that we have here. And when Jess was saying about the market, that you have more people asking for jobs and everything, I think we have a good part in Brazil also, because the market is too big. And I think when Shani said, I really totally agree that, like, if we get together, the thing is that there are people that do not the best work. They're worrying about branding, telling they do some work like behavior sites, behavior informing, they don't. And I think if we get together people that want serious research and practical things and change the world, I think I agree that we can go much further. So the good part is that in Brazil, Jess, I know that the UK, you have so many places that offer behavior insights. We have consulting, research teams, but here in Brazil we have few. I think we need to form many. I'm very happy with the people I've met since I came back, and I think we have brilliant people here and outside, and I think the opportunity to get them together, because the experience in the UK can help us. The Busara Center can help us, because we have very few, yet I think very much less than we can do here in Brazil. You know, like we have not many people working in this area yet. So that's a nice thing. We have a great market, a lot of problems, and I think a lot of willing to solve and get together and solve these big problems.
Thank you so much, Flávia. Channing, parting thoughts?
Yeah, a really interesting, stimulating discussion today and throughout the whole conference. So really thanks to everyone. And if you didn't get a chance, I'm definitely going to have to go back and find 72 hours in the next couple months to listen to all of the different panels. You know, certainly for behavioral science, I agree. Like, you know, there's this really nice African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think with what Jez is saying, Jez said earlier, you know, nudging in behavioral science isn't a unicorn, and it's not a quick fix. And, you know, even though people want that to be, even if it might be the fad now, you know, the goal is not to capitalize on a fad and move on to the next fad. The goal is for people who really believe in the science of it and believe in doing it well to go together. And whether that means, you know, creating new education programs, South-South collaborations, North-South collaborations, I think we should really try to focus on going together. So again, please reach out to me. I'm definitely going to follow up with all of you guys on how we can work together so that we can go a lot farther.
Thank you so much, Channing. Iman, parting thoughts? You're on mute.
So same, I would emphasize and invite also to, in Tunisia especially, we have not enough university teaching behavioral science. I think not even, we have a small module in an MBA in management. So this is something that maybe with Channing mentioned that we can learn a lot from your experience. As you've worked on East Africa, I think mainly, and we can build a shared like guide or something that can serve or that can help in putting some online material in and give access to people here, and at least to have more practitioners, because here the disadvantage that we don't have, we have difficulty to recruit behavioral scientists, for example, in Tunisia. So mainly we work with people from a design thinking background, or sometimes even some people who've learned from online courses and practices on the field. And the others also, I do emphasize on sharing and cooperating, and you feel free to reach out to me, same. So would be happy to cooperate.
Thank you so much, Iman.
Thank you.
Just your parting thoughts.
Yeah, I think that behavioral science has had strong representation in kind of the easiest cultures and countries. So I'm very, very fortunate sitting in London and having a very libertarian sort of environment where people can experiment. And I think it's interesting that, you know, that there's two areas I think that maybe are still underrepresented. And I kind of hinted at one before, which I hadn't really thought about myself, but I think there's some maybe more. I think Iman would be interested on your perspective, but I think the behavioral science community could do more to support the Middle East and do more to support Eastern Europe, where maybe it's just harder to get people to buy into these concepts because of the cultures and the way that the state is structured. And I think that's quite interesting that, you know, when I reflect on Nudgestock, reflect on now, I think there's just a few pockets that I think we most probably need to just work a bit harder to put our arms around. Yeah, I'll take that as an action and as a final thing to find out and help those people, because it's a lonely job, isn't it, trying to tell people about this stuff and especially in those types of cultures and difficult circumstances sometimes. So I think more collaboration with us, and then let's try and pull the ladder, give people a leg up in those countries that really do need it, rather than fortunate Londoners.
Thank you so much, Jez. That I mean, very well put thoughts. Thanks for everything. In fact, now this is the tough part, because how do you summarize a panel, a discussion like this? Fantastic mind, fantastic thoughts. I think I'll take the easy route out. Instead of making me sound dumb by trying to, pay respect by saying something nice, I'm simply gonna say, Pedro, gracias. Thank you so much. Flávia, obrigado. And Channing and Jez, thank you so much. Iman, shukran. You guys were fantastic out here, and I love the way you tied the discussion together. We've got people from across the world waiting down. For those who could not, hear us right now, you're gonna have a recorded version, which makes me wonder how will they know what I just said, because they're not here right now. But thank you all for being here. Stay safe. Yes, the possibilities are immense, and with the kind of attitude you all have, I think the future of behavioral science is pretty safe. It's in good hands. Yeah. So thank you so much.